Well, blessed Monday to you as we come with your daily encouragement. And we have been finishing this first section in the book of Revelation, the revelation to the seven specific churches of Western Turkey. And now we move to a new section. Now, directions, visions, and other things are always important in this book. So, John had Jesus before him walking among the seven lampstands. And then the first words that we see to know it is a new section. He looks up. And that is because he is going to get a heavenly vision. It isn't that we necessarily didn't have a heavenly vision. The vision came down. Now, from the perspective of where he's at, he has to look up to heaven and see what the reality is that is going on in heaven. And we're going to have, guess what, 7 of these visions coming up. You have to remember that each of them are its own entity, but we still have the discussion. Are we talking about 7 versions of the same vision? Or are we talking about a chronological order? That is the biggest issue in how to interpret the book of Revelation. Do we view this as one event that causes to the end, or do we look at it as multiple ways of seeing the same event? And I'm just going to leave that open as a question as we go through this. We'll see similarities with the events, but we'll also see some differences. And with the visions that we've already had in the book, they'll help us in interpreting the rest of the book. And that, I think, is so important to just keep on reminding ourselves of what we have seen before and what we have yet to see. So let us start with Revelation chapter 4, beginning with the first verse. After this, the vision of the churches, I looked, and there in heaven a door stood open. Now, we've already heard about a door being open. It's bringing in the people. And so one could say it's probably the same door that is bringing in John. The welcome into heaven. Jesus says, I am the door. And then he says, I'm the open door. He also says he's knocking on the door to make sure that we let him in. So doors are always an image of opportunity, either open or shut. And we have to ask ourselves, who can open the door? Jesus. And the first voice. So we have a voice, and it says first, so which means that we'll probably have multiple other voices. They'll complement each other. They will reach a conclusion. So keep your number counting up. We have an open door and a first voice, which I heard speaking to me like a trumpet. A voice like a trumpet. We'll be hearing about trumpets in a little bit. Come up here. Like I said, he was down and he's been up invited to another level of heaven. Paul says that he was transfixed to the third heaven. There are many authors of the ancient world that said there are multiple levels of heaven. We don't really have a focus on which level John has been invited to, but he's been coming up to a new vision. Come up here and I will show you what must take place after this. What must take place after this? Now, in some interpretations, they'll say, what is this after this about? Some have argued that it is the entirety of history up till the very end, which is the book of Revelation. Others have argued it is the vision of the 7 churches that is the after this. We don't know, but those are up to speculation. So, I'm not going to read any more into that, just simply saying that's where some will make a big deal or less of a big deal, depending on where they're going with this book. At once, in the Spirit, there in heaven stood a throne, with one seated on the throne. Now, if it is after history, it is not the idea that Jesus comes to the throne at the end of history. He's been on the throne. When we sing the hymn of praise in our churches, we sing it usually from the perspective of the angels opening up to the reality of the thrones in heaven that are happening now. We celebrate with the hymn of praise about God's present reign as much as we anticipate a future reign. So we got to remember that there is maybe a future, maybe a present, maybe a little bit of both going on here. At once I was in the Spirit, and there in heaven stood a throne, and the one seated on the throne. And the one seated on the throne looks like jasper and carnelian. And around the throne is a rainbow that looks like an emerald. So we had to kind of get the images of jasper, carnelian, and emerald. And so you can kind of imagine, but it also says there's a rainbow. So we're not just talking about the colors of just those three stones, we're talking about multiple colors. If you remember the ephod that the priest wore in Israel, it was made up of 12 different colored stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel. So we're going to have multiple different colors and hues that come together. And so we have around the throne 24 thrones, and seated on the throne the seated on the thrones are the 24 elders dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their head. Now maybe 24 doesn't mean anything to you, but if we divided 24 by half, you'll have 12, and 12 is considered one of those holy numbers. And you could say that if 12 is a holy number, the holy number has been doubled. I've heard everything about the interpretation of who these elders are. Everything from the first 12 are the leaders, the 12 sons of Israel. I've heard that the other 12 are the 12 apostles. Those are interesting possibilities. But what we are called to imagine, though, is that whatever holy thing that has happened is doubled in heaven. I've even heard the interpretation that this is the second level of heaven, so where everything is doubled. However you want to interpret this, the 12 is to signify that we've entered into a holy number like 12, and it's been doubled in heaven. And I think that if we leave it at that, we probably get a decent interpretation of this. And around the 12 were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders dressed in, once again, the white robes. Remember, it was offered to Laodicea, and golden crowns on their head. Coming from the throne are flashes of lightning and rumbling and peals of thunder. And in front of the throne burn 7 flaming torches. Remember, we had 7 lampstands, we have 7 torches, 7 spirits of God. And in front of the throne, there is something like a sea of glass, like crystal. Now, we don't know if those lampstands are the lampstands of the 7 churches we have visited. Some have argued that that's the connector between chapter 3 and chapter 4. Maybe, maybe not. But the key thing here should be the placid, crystal-like lake that is in front of the throne. Water is a symbol of chaos, and what you'll see here is that water in heaven is always still, always placid, always calm, because the chaos of the world has departed. And this is where God rules from his throne with his 24 elders, and it is a place that we can trust. And you have to remember, in a time where there's a lot of chaos, a lot of things happening, maybe like our world today, it is good to know the solidity of the throne and the 24 elders and the place where God rules. And that's one of the images I think that is so important with these numbers. God is in charge, not the world. God is in charge here. We're going to stop right here today, just to make sure that you have that image in your mind, and we'll continue in chapter 4 tomorrow. We pray that these continue to be words of encouragement. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time.